Welcome everybody to Letter Now, a podcast where we nurture the hand lettering masters of tomorrow, today. My name is Martina Flor. I'm a lettering artist, author, educator, and the host of this show. And today I have an awesome guest to talk about dealing with pressure and meditation. How can we avoid feeling guilty taking a rest when the deadline is coming up? How do you manage multiple projects with the same deadline? How do you distinguish resting from being lazy? How do you deal with the pressure if you don't want to meditate? And to discuss and find an answer to all of these questions, I have my guest, Lucas, here with me. Luke is a freelance creative art director, illustrator, designer, and typographer who has been in the creative industries for years now and has recently become a teacher of ventric meditation. Hi, Luke. How are you doing today?
Hello, nice to be here.
So happy to have you in the podcast. I've been following your work for a while, Luke, and while most of the things you share were artwork or things related to the creative work you do, you recently started sharing more about this other side of you and your experience with meditation and the fact that you have become a teacher in ventric meditation, which wasn't that visible for many of us. Like, it was a little bit of a surprise for me, and I really got interested in hearing what you have to say about this and what your experience is. So to kick off the conversation, I'd like to ask you first, how do these two things combine together right now in your life? How, doing creative commercial work and for clients and teaching meditation combine in your daily life?
Well, I guess I've been meditating for a very long time. So I've had a meditation practice throughout the majority of my career, and becoming a teacher felt like a natural kind of progression. Really, it's something that I guess I've been practicing for a long time, and I felt like I wanted to share it because it's been really helpful for me. So, in terms of managing my time and the two hats, I guess I just block out time for each, I guess, and work on it that way.
That's so interesting because I think for many of us, I've been, recently realizing that, many of us have been, you and me, for instance, have been in this industry for a while, and I've noticed that, throughout time, our interests and the things we do sort of change or transform or transition into other things. And it's really fascinating to see, to discover this side of you and this, a new side of other creatives out there. Because oftentimes we think that, hey, this is something new or this is something that, is out of the blue. But actually you have been developing this throughout all of these years, and perhaps now you're coming to talk about it or to make it public or whatever, but this is something that has always been happening in your life, right? And a few months ago you made a post on your Instagram account on how you started meditation, and you mentioned that you always had a busy mind, and this is why you lean towards meditation, right? And I believe that many of us creatives can relate to the feeling of having a busy mind. And I know that many of the listeners of this podcast are illustrators or lettering artists, and they are also freelancers maybe. So I guess our everyday life is a mix of doing creative work and at the same time dealing with the pressure of client deadlines and also the pressure of staying current in the industry and being present on social media, which I feel this creates a mix that it's just terrible for our well-being, right? So did you lean into meditation as a coping mechanism with this busy mind or this pressure that you felt as a creative?
Yeah, very much so. And I guess I got into meditation prior to being a full-on creative, I guess. So I knew that I had a really busy mind through my teen years, and didn't really know how to deal with it. I knew that when I was skateboarding, or if I was playing guitar or running or doing something quite active, I found that kind of distracted me from my mind. But when I stopped doing all that stuff, if I wanted to even try to sleep, then my mind would go crazy. And I'm not sure if it's like being a creative, you're the way our minds work, or it's just the way my mind works. But I just couldn't. It became sort of unbearable, and I started developing some pretty bad habits to try and deal with that. And my dad actually suggested I try meditation. That's sort of how I got into it. I started going to this place sort of once a week, and they'd sort of, it was a Buddhist meditation center, and they would sort of talk about different philosophies and that they had with regards to different bits and pieces, and then it would end with a group meditation at the end, and out of the back of that I sort of developed my own meditation practice, and I did that for years. And at the time it was a type of practice that's known as a concentrative style, which is a meditation practice where you focus on an object or a subject, which could be like your breath or something. And doing so, you kind of it distracts you from everything else. So you give your full attention to that one thing at the exclusion of everything else. And in doing so, you kind of find stillness in that moment and the capacity to focus as well. And that actually was something that I found really useful in terms of my work. So I could be in a busy studio environment and have my work in front of me, and the rest of the world would disappear. I could just focus on work. But yeah, the same issue occurred, I guess, when I stopped working. My mind was still going crazy. So that technique wasn't necessarily what I needed to do with everything. And if anything, I became a workaholic, because I knew that when I was working, I could shut my mind off and I could just focus on something. And that served a purpose in that I became obsessed with work, and it helped me develop my career earlier on. That it wasn't really until I started Vedic meditation, which was probably like 10 years into my career, that I really started to be able to sort of deal with that chatter in my mind.
That's so interesting, because as you said, like sometimes I also feel that when I'm working or doing creative work, I get into the zone. And I think this happens to many of us, that this is the place where we are in our flow, right? And I think the fact that this is the place where we are in our flow can also lead to kind of become a workaholic, or like not really allocating time to work and to creative work, and time to like free your mind of any clutter, even creative clutter, you know, like, and I think that I personally, as a creative, in the very beginning, I was sort of buying into this prototype of like constantly creating stuff, like being constantly in like working or thinking of new projects, or like creating client projects, or creating projects for myself. And I think this is also like a very bad habit as a creative, that you have to be creating all the time. Whereas I think that more and more I'm realizing personally that creating that space where nothing happens really enables creativity later on, right? Like these valleys sort of are the previous step to creating something, right? And I think there's we're not very conscious of that need that we have as creatives, right? And I think meditation, or what you were mentioning before, allowing time to like rest, is actually so essential for us to create, right? So, as you know, this is a listener-driven show. So as we go down the questions from our listeners, I would like to discuss with you about strategies that we can use to cope with pressure as creatives. And of course, we will learn more about meditation and how that can become a powerful tool for that purpose. I also feel that I personally had a lot of preconceptions about meditation. You know, there's a lot of, like it's not very clear what being mindful is, or what meditation is about. And I think what you were mentioning before, which has to do with like focusing on something for a long time without thinking of other things, is already like a very simple concept to understand meditation. So I would like to go deeper into that concept as we go through the questions. So we will start with questions from our listeners coming from social media. Today we have a question from Marion, who is saying, how can we feel less guilty when taking time for ourselves, knowing that the deadline is coming? So, Marion, I can totally relate to your question, and in fact, I think that what Marion is saying here has to do with this idea that in order to be successful, you have to be busy all the time. And I know that I have bought into that stereotype in the very beginning that, the busier I was and the more I was working overtime, the more successful I felt, or I thought I was, which is, I think, perhaps the fastest way of hating your work or end up hating your work. So what about you, Luke? How do you see or go about these times of inactivity in your work? And what would you say to Marion that is feeling this guilt around those moments?
It does feel, I guess, it can seem a little self-indulgent to sort of take time out for yourself, but really what you're doing, I actually think our relationship to being busy is really unhealthy, and there's a really big difference between being busy and being productive. And I think by taking time out for yourself, what you're actually doing is you're clearing your mind and you're becoming more present, and in doing so, you're inviting inspiration and you're able to work more efficiently. So it might seem really self-indulgent and like a waste of time from the outside, someone sitting down, closing their eyes for 20 minutes when they've got a million things to do and deadlines and whatever. But what you're actually doing is enabling yourself to be able to do your work more efficiently. And meditation really works for me for that, I guess. But there are other practices that people can do, but that's the one that's really helped me with clearing my mind and being present. And what you were saying before about being mindful, that's the definition of mindfulness is a non-judgmental present moment awareness. And it's very much a byproduct of a meditation practice.
Can you repeat that? What being mindful is?
It's a non-judgmental present moment awareness. So awareness of the here and now without any attachment to anything to do with it, just accepting what is here and now.
Without judging. That's so interesting. Like without putting like a tag or like a label on it. Like this is cool, this is not cool, or yeah. So there's another. Sorry.
It just helps you to be more sort of adaptive and respond more fluidly, I guess. And just take on the information and then do your thing, I guess, create.
Yeah. And so you use meditation as a mean of as a coping mechanism with this busy mind or these busy phases of your day, right? Is there any other techniques or coping mechanisms you use, or is meditation like the one you prefer or you widely use in your daily life?
Well, I have a daily meditation practice, so I practice in the morning and in the evening. But outside of that, I surf. I find that really helpful. Being in nature, I do breath techniques as well. So breath techniques can be really helpful for sort of stabilizing your nervous system, or if you're in a situation where you have, I get quite nervous before a meeting or something like that. If I feel like I'm not quite ready for it, I can take a moment and center myself and focus on my breath and give that attention and just watch the rise and fall of my breath in my mind for 5 minutes before a meeting, and it helps to sort of stabilize my nerves and calm right down. And that's a really useful tool, just using your breath. It's very powerful.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think that I recently started doing small sessions of meditation. Actually, I realized how meditation could be powerful as a tool. About a year and a half ago, because I started walking in the nights, going for a walk in the nights. So during lockdown here in Germany, because of COVID, I was just taking these long walks in the nights. So I was going for an hour around the city, and I noticed that that had a big impact on my well-being, on how I felt happy and more productive and more creative. And I started realizing that it was perhaps I was allowing this space not to do anything, because if I would stay at home, I would just feel that, hey, I'm not doing anything. I need to do something. Either I clean the house, or I just do something in my computer or whatever. So just going for a walk, just put me in this position of like not being able to do anything, just walk. And so I realized that there was something there on allowing space for, to think or to not think about anything specific, that I thought like there's something here. And then I started digging a little bit more into meditation. And of course, there's like different ranges of how you can meditate. Like, I think most of the people has this idea or this image of meditation that has to do with this same position and like being there for an hour. But sometimes like just focusing on what you're doing in the moment, whatever that is, like washing the dishes or doing the dishes or like drawing or whatever you're doing is already meditation, right? Like, and it has a lot to do with this concept of mindfulness that you just mentioned, that how being present and not judgmental of that thing you're seeing or experiencing is really opening up that space, right? So I'm going to move on to the next question by Corina, who is also speaking about this idea of like dealing with pressure and dealing with deadlines at the same time. So Corina is saying how to manage multiple projects with the same urgent deadline. And Corina, I have a question for you. First, why would you take multiple projects with the same urgent deadline? I think that, part of wisely managing the time as a creative and the clients and your work is understanding that you have only that much energy. And my therapist proposed me an exercise this week, actually. She asked me to write down certain categories in my life. So for instance, and I think this could be useful for anyone listening, for anyone watching on YouTube, and even for you, Luke. So she made me write down all the different categories in my life, right? So work and kids and friends and my couple and learning. And then she gave me 100 points. She told me that those 100 points represented all of my energy. And she asked me to assign points to the different categories, right? So according to how much energy I'm investing on those categories. And this was really revealing, because if I noticed that I was putting little energy on my couple or on exercising or on work, then I needed to, in order to improve that, I needed to carve energy from or points from the other categories, right? And I feel that concept can be so helpful to understand that you have limited capacity, and you have to use that capacity and that energy wisely. So I feel that, the same can apply to a creative business where you are taking up or you're taking on client work. You have an X amount of resources available, and you need to decide where you put your energy, right? And, if you say yes to everything, then that energy or those 100 points will be spread out in a lot of different things, right? But I feel that also us as creatives, it becomes really hard to say no to stuff because we want to do it all. Like, we love what we do, and every opportunity that comes our way is a good opportunity most of the times. We really want to do that work, right? So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with, taking on work and managing your time wisely so that pressure don't eat you up?
I think this is like this is sort of a unique problem for freelancers more than anyone else, because we do have, it is a bit of a roller coaster with freelance. Either the tap is on or it's off, and when there's a lot of work on, it is very hard to say no if you've had a quiet period. So you do want to do it all, and I think some of us have the tendency to want to perfect everything, like have the perfect piece, and we can refine something forever and never be completely satisfied. So I guess part of it is knowing when to let it go. You can only take something so far, and then you have to sort of move on to the next thing. But it's also, like you were saying, it is time management and being efficient with your time, and that's where I guess having the capacity to be clear and present is really helpful, because when you are on something, you're not thinking about relationship issues and finance issues and self-worth issues and other stuff. You are there in the moment with your work, and you can focus on that and get through it without being distracted by other stuff, which isn't helping you in your task. You can just focus on the task at hand, get through it, and move to the next thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that also, like, what Corina could do is, if the idea is to take on several projects at the same time, that at least try to discuss with the clients so that the deadlines don't overlap. In my experience, I feel that deadlines are, most of the times, are internal deadlines, and they are flexible, so you can, things happen in between. We are all humans, like things get delayed, and you can always speak or move deadlines if you speak to the person in front of you, if you speak to your clients. So what I would definitely avoid, Corina, is to have deadlines overlapping on the same day. This is really calling for disaster every time. So don't do that. Don't do that. So, all right, let's move to our next segment, which is our inspirational quote time. Look, we all love quotes, and especially lettering artists, we live from this. Like, we illustrate quotes for a living. And in this section, we do our best to answer questions from our listeners with a quote. So we later put these quotes on our show notes so that listeners can share them on social media. The truth, look, is that we just chat about the question for a while, and if we happen to find a quote, we will put it on the show notes. If you don't happen to find a quote, then we will put something together for you and make you sound really, really smart. So here's the first question from Steve. How to distinguish mindfully letting myself to rest from being lazy? And I love this. I love this question. Like, it's so honest. Because also we think that, watching Netflix or scrolling down our social media feeds can count as taking a break. But oftentimes these breaks, they leave us more drained. Like, when was the last time you were on social media and you end up saying like, oh, I feel so refreshed. I feel so inspired, right? Like, most of the time, these experiences leave us like really drained. And I have this quote for you that I wrote, Steve. Being distracted is another form of being busy. So putting yourself to rest is a lot more about subtracting the things you're exposed to, rather than switching to another new thing. It's a lot more about decluttering, I feel, right? And I feel that this is perhaps one of the hardest things to do. When I started experiencing with meditation, what you were mentioning before, Luke, this practice of like focusing on one thing or focusing on your breathing and not just thinking about that is so freaking hard. When you're not used to. So actually decluttering your mind from thoughts is like perhaps the hardest thing to do. And I'm curious what you have to say about this. And how was that that curve for you of like starting with meditation and then really turn it into a tool or something that is incorporated in your mind, in your life?
Well, it's worth noting that that's not a technique that I practice anymore. So there are so many different techniques of meditation that was, I guess, my gateway drug to meditation. And it is a very common one, I guess, that those concentrated techniques. And they are challenging because you're using the same mind that's busy to try and control your mind. And that in itself is kind of crazy. And if you're trying to focus on your breath and doing so without trying to control your breath, that's kind of really tricky as well. So it does take a lot of practice, but it is achievable. But the particular technique that I teach uses a mantra now, which is a slightly different concept and a different style of meditation. And it's more of a, I guess the mantra that you're given a personal mantra, I guess, in this technique. And that mantra has its own, almost like a gravity that draws you inwards. And by giving it your attention, it draws you deeper and deeper to deeper and deeper, more subtle states of awareness. And in doing so, you as you go deeper and deeper, you experience higher levels of bliss. So you start to feel more sort of content. And out of that kind of contentedness comes the silence. So if you think about the way the mind kind of works, it's always looking for something, right? It's always searching for something that's the most interesting, or that's going to grant it the most happiness. But as the mind experiences these deeper and more blissful states, it begins to feel more and more content, and it's not searching for anything. And in those moments, you do experience silence, I guess, as a byproduct of that bliss. And then you sort of come out of that, and that sort of a residue of that experience is left with you in the waking state. And that's kind of how this technique works differently.
So you just mentioned that from you find content in silence. So the technique actually leads your mind into silence, and this is where you find content, right? If I got it right.
Leads your mind into subtler states of awareness, and the byproduct of that bliss that you experience is silence. So you're not actively silencing the mind. You're just going to deeper states of awareness, and as a byproduct, you are experiencing that kind of silence. But when you come out of the meditation, that, like I was saying, that residue of that experience is there, and you begin to experience and interact with the world from that sort of deeper state of awareness. So that bliss, the hint of that bliss is kind of still there, and that quietness and that sort of deep, expansive kind of stillness is still there, and it's sort of where you're based and experience the world, as opposed from being in that kind of reactive, busy kind of headspace. You're sort of, you exist at a deeper level, more with like a subtler level of awareness.
So interesting. And how did you actually turn that into a habit? Because I think the hardest thing is to turn these practices into habits, right? Like we all have the habit, or many of us have the habit of like scrolling on social media when we are in the supermarket line, or I don't know, waiting for something. Whereas I think that perhaps with a bit more intention, we can create habits that are more meaningful and a bit more healthy for our minds, right? So how did you turn that into a habit?
Well, part of I guess the way that you learn it, part of it is almost like a commitment when you finish the course to do it at least for 40 days without stopping. And I think what most people find is after they've been practicing it consistently for that long, they can already feel the benefits, and you almost become addicted, I guess, to that good feeling. And having a regular practice for that sort of first 40 days, you don't really want to go back to the old you, because you know what it's like to be a better you. So yeah
I can so relate to that. Like I mean I feel the kind of practice you do is so has so much more intention and like a real commitment, as you said right now. But when I speak about my night walks, I'm super committed to this. Like I won't miss a night walk, like not even on the weekends. Like I would totally do that, because I know, like I said to my husband the other day, like there's no way back. Like I'm not gonna go back to how it was before for me, or like to my previous state. Like this is so much better, and I just if there's more, I just want more, so that's why I'm so curious about how do you go deeper into these practices, because if they're so positive for your well-being, then how can you have more of that in your life, right? So the second question I have here is coming from Eleazar, which is really interesting, since we are speaking so much about meditation and how great that has been for you, and well, for me in the little exercises that I have done throughout this past year. So Eleazar is asking, how do you deal with pressure if you don't want to meditate? And Eliasar, I have to say that I feel that meditation is not the answer to all problems. It's just one of many coping mechanisms. And I feel also that, I bet that perhaps Eliasar has this idea of meditation that I was mentioning before, that, to meditate, you really need to have like 2 hours of meditate for 2 hours of your day and totally change your lifestyle and become like a different person or whatever. And there's really like ways of using meditation in much more like reduced ways, but that they have a great impact in your life. But I feel that, before we need to ask ourselves why are we feeling that pressure, right? So I have a quote for Eliasar, which is like, pressure is subjective, and most of the times pressure is auto-imposed, right? Either we put ourselves high standards on the short time frame that we have, or we say to ourselves that we need to make it to the deadline, or the world is gonna end, right? So many of the obstacles we see are just facts. And that relates so much to where you were saying before about like observing reality without judging. And I think that, pressure in a way is a lot about like assigning facts a certain label. So saying that, because there's this deadline, I need to, be nervous or like be anxious about it. And actually, it has a lot to do with us or how we see those facts, right? And I'm now rereading a book that is called by Ryan Holiday. I don't know if you read it, perhaps, but it's super interesting for anyone. Like, it's called "The Obstacle is the Way," and he speaks about how we tend to freak out, like in a nutshell, right? Like how we tend to freak out when we find obstacles, and how freaking out is actually detrimental to creating a good outcome, and how we put our own subjectiveness towards those facts, whereas these are just facts. If you just take them as facts and you keep calm, then probably how you deal with that obstacle will be a much more healthy solution, or will lead to a much more healthy solution, right? And you mentioned before that, I want to pass it to you now, Luke. You mentioned before that you use meditation right now as a coping tool, or like as a tool to, feeling more happiness or feel more content in your life. But I know that in the past, or you mentioned that in the past you tried other methods that were not so healthy, and perhaps you have a comment for Eliasar that is asking here, like, okay, I don't want to meditate, or I don't feel that this is something for me. Which other things I can use that will help me cope or deal with pressure?
Sure. Pressure, the way that we respond to pressure is through stress, and stress itself is like totally the enemy of creative inspiration. It shuts down that creative part of your brain. So if you don't have some way of dealing with stress, you're going to experience creative blocks, and you're not going to be able to sort of tap into that inspiration, and you need some way to deal with that. And I guess meditation is a really effective way for me, but it's not the only thing that I do. I know that in the mornings I've got a morning ritual. I don't look at my phone for the first hour of the day. Don't look at it. I don't speak to anyone for the first hour either. I get up, I meditate, and I'll go for a walk. I'll go walk my dog down at the beach, come home, and then I'll sort of interact with the world. But that's a really important thing for me. I have that sort of quiet time, and even if I didn't meditate, I'd still do something like that. I think it's good to have that time out, and not just dive straight into emails and social media and stuff as soon as you wake up. I think a healthy sleep hygiene is really important. If you're going to bed late, or you're drinking 5 coffees a day, and you're not actually helping yourself deal with stress, because when you rest, that's sort of when you process stress, and sleep's a really effective way of processing stuff. But if you get to the point where you're overstressed, then you can't sleep, and it's sort of like a vicious cycle, isn't it? So it is good to have some kind of, I find it's good to have some kind of physical practice as well, whether it be, yoga is really good. If you don't like meditation, maybe yoga's not for you. But maybe, I don't know, running is quite good. I know that there's a sort of a meditative running movement where it's sort of like that, I guess it's similar to mantra in a way that it's a repetitive kind of thing, you know, like it's focusing on just the next step, and there is a meditative quality in that. So maybe that could be a good option for you. But you do need to do, if you want any kind of longevity in this career as a creative, you need to have a way to deal with pressure, because it's not going away. There's always going to be tight deadlines. There's always going to be unreasonable clients. You're always going to need to come up with new ideas. There's always going to be competition. You're always going to have other stuff going on. There's going to be pressures from the rest of your life. And if you're not able to deal with all that, you won't be able to do your job.
Absolutely. And I wrote down something that you say, which is stress is the enemy of creative inspiration. I think this is actually what we need to, as creatives, what we need to take care of more, right? And creating these habits, like some of them, of the ones you mentioned, are resting, yoga, walking, running. So sort of allowing space for other things in your life. And I think, Eleazar, what you could do if you're not interested in meditation is like to experience these other alternatives and find which one is for you, right? So as I said, with these walks that I do in the night, I did that for a month and I saw like an improvement in my well-being, and then I continue doing that because that works with, the kind of life I have. I put the kids to sleep and then I go for a walk, and like it fits in my lifestyle, right? So you need to find something that works for you, but it's important that you work consciously towards finding that thing, because otherwise it's like the things you're doing or your habits are being detrimental to your creativity, which is your number one tool, right? So I think those are really good like hints on how to find good habits for creatives also, and for someone who is really feeling that pressure of working with clients and being a freelancer. But it's a lot about like making compromises, right? Like or like making the compromise of like following that or doing something consistently to maintain a certain level of health in your creative practice, right?
Yeah, it's weird. I guess a lot of people are happy to have like a gym membership and work on their bodies and stuff, but they don't have that same relationship with their mind. They don't have that same kind of dedication or commitment in trying to keep their mind clear and help with that kind of thing. But it's really important in so many aspects of our lives to have some kind of way of coping with stress. It's toxic.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So look, we're moving now to our Better Now segment, which is the last segment of our show, where we share something we are happy about or something that has impacted our lives lately. It's a little bit of a gratitude moment that we have here in the show. So Luke, what would you like to share that you're currently happy about? Could be anything, could be a project you're working on, or something about your family, or whatever you want to share with the audience.
Well, this is a tough one because we are in lockdown. I'm homeschooling my kids. I've got lots of work on, but I am happy that we're all healthy, and we do live in a beautiful part of the world. And I guess I'm just happy to be able to do something that I love. I love my job, and I have for as long as I've done it. And I feel like in this world, that's a real privilege because not many people can say that. So I'm very grateful for being able to do what I do for a living.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. And I'm also like, especially now, by the time this show is being published, the next day on the 27th of July, I'm opening registrations for my coaching program for lettering artists and illustrators. For a couple of years now, I've been offering this program for, to help lettering artists and illustrators launch their creative business. And I think this is such a great thing to do, not only for me as a coach of my students, but also I know that it has been transformative for many of them. And what I love about the program is that it's not only about launching a freelance business, which has a lot of technicalities to it, but it's a lot about like thinking, being mindful about what you're doing and being like very, creating a business that is built around what you want to do and makes you happy, which is like something that I find so important in what we do as creatives, that ultimately everything we do, how we build our business, the habits we have, our daily habits, they build up towards making us happy, right? Because we are the number one tool of our business and our creativity. And I think we are really in the center of everything. So I'm launching this coaching program tomorrow. So it's opening registrations tomorrow. So for everyone that is interested in taking part, I'm offering also a free workshop. So you can sign up for free on maketheleapnow.com. Registrations will open on the 27th of July, and they will be open for just 3 days. And after that, it's closed until next year. So if you're interested and you want to explore it, sign up for the free workshop. If you sign up for the free workshop, you will get tons of value out of it. Whether you join the program or not, this is going to be like a great experience for you to join. So you can go to maketheleapnow.com and sign up for the free workshop. So look, this is the end of our show. It was so great to have you and to speak about... where can people find you, and where can also people find about your courses on Ventric meditation?
Vedic meditation. You can find me on Instagram. I've got my lettering account is Luke_Lucas, and my meditation account is Luke_Lucas_meditation. So those two places. Or you can find me on lukelucas.com as well. I've got my own website. Online.
Amazing. So is Ventric meditation or Vendic?
Vedic. So it's Vedic.
Sorry.
Yes.
Amazing. Right. We're going to add all of this to our show notes so that everyone can find you and find your classes. I'm personally going to dig into that as well. So thank you so much for being here today and for being in the show. So great. For everyone watching, this is it. You can find me, the host of this show, on social networks at Martina Flor on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. If you have a question or comments about this podcast, you can send us a voice message on martinaflor.com/voice message. You can also watch this podcast on YouTube, going to martinaflor.com/YouTube. You can, of course, listen to this episode and previous episodes on your favorite podcast platform. So this is it for today. If you love this episode, subscribe to this channel, and if you leave us a review, it will help others find us. So thank you all for listening, and see you on the next episode of Let Her Now. Bye bye.